verbalize and declare some of these things, whether,
Some people would call those affirmations.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, KK and I we practice saying a lot of affirmations. I mean, and that's as basic as looking at myself in the mirror and saying I love you. I do that. I try to do that every day, and not just think it, but say it, speak it out loud. And
go ahead.
I think there's weight and power in our voices and in sound, and
it's not just saying words. What is the spirit behind those affirmations?
Mm-hmm.
Who does God say we are?
Yeah.
We can say we're this and that and the other. I'm great. I'm good. I'm smart, and it may be true, but who does God say you are? Yeah. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. So it's having conscious gratitude for those things.
Yeah. Well, and you can, sometimes you ebb and flow with it throughout the day, but it's like, can you wake up and be grateful for 3 things? Before you go to bed, can you name 3 things that you're grateful for that happened that specific day?
What does God think of us? Mm-hmm. We think of him from the filter of the Western church, from religion, but that isn't what God says.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the first half of my life, and probably longer, I always felt like God rejected me. Everything I did, I think I felt like was wrong. How I felt, my sexuality.
Which is weird. Nobody ever actually said it, did they?
It comes up in behaviors, it comes up in the way that how people react or respond. I don't know if it's...
Or your perception of how they did?
Right. It might not have been actually said or whatever, but, I had big feels, and I don't think that was... I don't think all the time y'all were as receptive to that, and it's not,
Sure. That's true.
It's not like, and I'm not blaming y'all, but I definitely started believing these stories, and created these narratives of who I thought God was, and I just thought he was angry and...
Well, they're limiting. In fact, in coaching, that's what it's called, limiting beliefs.
Right.
The loops that play in our head that tell us all those things.
Right.
Tune in and start looking at what you're grateful for. Probably the biggest thing for me is the friendships that I have. I'm grateful for my wife, and that friendship is the best one I've got.
Yeah, that's
I'm
crazy.
I'm grateful for having relationships with my kids, because I look at a lot of my peers who don't have that. Mm-hmm. They are estranged or whatever, or just not even estranged, but don't have the kind of openness and intentionality around the relationships that we've got.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, it is. I have a question for you. Have you found space to be grateful in moments that maybe you don't necessarily like, or where because life's happening and there's bad stuff that is going on, and good people get hurt, and and there's war and there's genocide and there's all these horrible things going on, and sometimes I sometimes feel this sense of guilt of how much I do have and how much I am grateful for. But I have also gotten to places where, even though the situation, whatever it is not the most ideal, I'm still grateful for it, and because I feel like I can span out and see the big picture of life, of like, this is life right now. It's not pretty.
I have to choose to trust.
So would you say that there is a connection between having gratitude and then also trusting? Like, because you're trusting God in that, but is there a correlation between the two?
If you're ungrateful, I'm not sure how you would trust. I've never thought about the connection to it, but if you're angry and ungrateful and worrying, I don't see how you could correlate those things. Yeah.
And even if it's, I'm thinking of people who don't believe in anything, even if it's just trusting in life, at the very core of what just being alive and what that means. You know, there's no kind of contract when we come on into this planet that says that everything's going to go our way and everything's going to be great all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when I think and reflect on a lot of my journey, it was in some of the darkest, hardest moments of my life where I learned the most about who I was and who God was. And I don't think I could ever take that back, you know, as painful as some of it was. You know, I don't think I would change that, because how would I know what I know now, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah. One thing you and I talk a lot about too is joy and laughter.
Yeah.
How do we bring joy and laughter into nurturing?
Well, the more you press into relational spiritual growth, you find that it's not based on happiness. I just want to be happy. John Wooden was a coach in California, a college coach. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, he goes, "I'm not really worried about my players' happiness. I'm concerned with their peace of mind." Happiness is related to circumstance. Good things happen, so you're happy. Bad things happen, so you're sad. That is a roller coaster ride of anxiety and fear and really lack of trust. It can be. And it's like the weather, it changes every 5 minutes. But when you have joy, which is based on relationship, who you know, and learning how to be content and trust in whatever situation you find yourself in, that is a lot more consistent and sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same. I think we often look at joy and happiness as the same thing, and they're not. An ancient writer said, "I've learned to whatever state I'm in to be content." Well, that's not normal.
Who said that?
Paul said that.
The Apostle Paul.
Paul, Saul of Tarsus said it, and when he said it, he was in prison.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you know, it's and emphasis on I have learned.
Yeah.
Whatever state I'm in to be content.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
it's not normal. It's not natural. I think it's a supernatural thing you can learn. Or maybe not. The Buddhists who have a totally different belief system know about contentment.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, my time traveling over in Thailand really opened up my eyes, and even before that, I did a class in college in the Bahamas, and you know, seeing people who had nothing, they exuded the most joy just in their eyes, the way that they looked at you, you know. And I think I even experienced that with our family. You know, we weren't the poorest of poor, but we definitely weren't the richest of rich. We grew up, I remember struggling financially, and you know, our childhoods were definitely not perfect by any means, but we definitely there were a lot of moments of joy and laughter and fun, and I think you and Mom did a good job of that somehow, of instilling this ability for us to see joy in the little things, you know.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot, but we had close family, lots of good memories, and different levels of wealth, and yet we were able to laugh a lot.
How does forgiveness nurture your spirit?
Forgiveness keeps your spirit and your mind uncluttered with things you don't have control over.
I think it keeps things a lightness to your being as well. You know, I think of
it's a weight. Bitterness is a weight.
Yeah.
Unforgiveness is heavy.
Yeah, how does bitterness feel in your heart when you've been holding onto it for so long, and how does it fester, and how does it manifest? I mean, you think of, we often talk about the interconnectedness between, our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies, our mental bodies, but how does bitterness affect the body,
I think there's some studies, do not quote me on this, I could be wrong, but I thought I had read something about anger,
mm-hmm.
and how it's how it's related to things like arthritis, things like that.
I know that there are correlations. I've read a lot of good books actually about how the spiritual body manifests in our physical bodies. They say a lot of cancer is tied to a lot of worry.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, anyway, so there is like weight to it. I'm always thinking, okay, what's happening in this physical realm, and what is that stemming from in terms of the spiritual realm? Yeah. Like, what is it a reflection of?
There is this spiritual component that is it's like what you're saying. And if worry and unforgiveness and bitterness not only have a natural component, they have a supernatural one.
Yeah. When I think of the people I've had to forgive, people who have hurt me, and forgiving, you and Mom for things, and
right.
I think about how much that was weighing me down, and like the physical release, when I have released someone and forgiven them, I can physically tell in my body, I feel lighter. Yeah. And honestly, I think the hardest person for me to forgive was myself.
Yeah, and forgiveness is about the other person, because they are held captive almost by your unforgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about you.
Mm-hmm.
You hear in stories on the news about people forgiving those who've injured or killed their loved ones, and how that has brought freedom to both of them.
Yeah. That's a hard one, because there's some things that seem unforgivable and impossible. I don't know. I have friends who have forgiven things, and I'm just like, man, I don't know how you do it. And it's just funny, because I feel like we so badly want that, justice to be served, and right. The wrong to be right. And I think it's also this act of letting go. One thing I think that's fascinating, when we talk about diving in and starting to explore, your spirituality, it broadens the scope of those around me and the community around me. And in the sense that, I feel like I want to be a part of something bigger, mm-hmm. And so whenever I'm tending to my spirit, when I think of my time in Port Angeles, when I was really deep diving into a lot of that, it was the most connected to the community that I ever was. I just there is this communal part. It's almost like as the tide rises, so did the ships.
Well, I don't believe we were meant to be in total solitude all the time. Mm-hmm. We were meant to be in community.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I think a lot of us, we help each other grow in that way, is when we're in it together.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about the what, right? And do you feel like we hit on the why component of why you would nurture your spirit, or why it's important to nurture your spirit?
Well, that's where I was talking about these kind of the mental and emotional benefits of nurturing your spirit.
Oh, the connection, yeah.
Yeah, they're connected.
So maybe
well, how do spiritual practices like prayer and meditation, how is that linked to things like reduction of stress and anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
They
have a lot of studies that show the connection, when you give time to be still, and you give space to reflect and to journal. I think my mind always goes to our autonomic nervous system, which is often these days in a constant state of stress
Right.
and fight or flight, and so
Well, that leads us to something we've talked about before, is simple things like breathing and how that's related to anxiety attacks or panic attacks, is getting your breathing under control. And there was a study published by the Journal of Religion and Health that found that prayer actually significantly decreases those levels of stress.
yeah, I think that's neat because to me it signifies the infinite imagination of God.
Scripture talks about the peace of God, guarding our hearts and our minds.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in real life terms? Well, me worrying about this changes absolutely nothing. Well, if that's true, then why do we worry about it? Because it's the unknown and we have no control.
Mm-hmm.
What are ways that we can release that stress and anxiety? By trusting, or by forgiving, or by being humble, or all these things we've been talking about. It's all connected.
Right. Well, and I think we have to, for me, I had to get to a place where, it didn't matter what anybody said. I had to, when I hit rock bottom, it was like every second mattered. And I started seeing how, the effects or the fruits of me reaching out to a higher power.
Right.
And it didn't solve the issue at hand. It didn't didn't make it go away. But the way that I felt and the peace that I have felt in the last couple of years, it's like I have been searching and I've been a seeker for a long time now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't up until 17, when I got back stateside, that I started deep diving more specifically into the Judeo-Christian faith again, because I guess for the first time, because I hadn't really done it on my own accord.
And I remember you looking at you and I would have, some of our good discussions would be around other ways of getting to those things of Judeo-Christian or origin or foundation, like trust, like God being an actual being instead of a concept, things like that, that you were searching out.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's just like I was so persistent and just so hungry for more. It's like I got a little bit of taste of, comfort and ease in my internal body. I don't think a lot of people know this because I did such a good job of performing and wearing a bunch of different masks. And I don't think it was that I was inauthentic a lot of times, but I definitely only showed people a little bit. I could be vulnerable, but not to the place where it was showing some of my darkness or my rage. And so there was oftentimes just I internally was at battle and at war all the time. I was very uncomfortable in my body. I did not like, a lot of how I couldn't figure out how to align a lot of my values and morals. I had them, but there was so much dissonance. And
we would watch that from a distance, and I felt like my role was not to bring that up and make a point about it. It was you had to go through that struggle.
Yeah, and I really struggled with building these identities around ideologies that could only take me so far.
Right.
At some point I had to say, okay, none of that matters, and who am I trying to impress? And
a key component to all that,
excuse me,
which we could argue till the end of time, is one of the big differences with what we believe is that this is a relationship, not a religion, not just a practice. It's an actual relational interaction.
Well, yeah, I think that's where the last season of my life I've gotten, like, that's where I've realized the difference is, like, for so many years I thought all of it was
An ideology.
And just, yeah, just it was just religion, and it was all about what checking off a list of things that you're doing, and it was all effort, and it was all you had to earn it, and
and the subtle thing is that a lot of people live in that life. That's all their religion and all their quote unquote relationship with God is a bunch of rules and rituals and ideas.
Right. And I didn't think I could take any of my stuff, my baggage, my doubts, my fears, my demons. Like, I didn't think I could take any of that to God. Like, I thought it had to be polished and be a certain way.
Right.
And so I think that's where, like, being in the mess with God and seeing his loving kindness and that he was for me, not against me.
Well, religion says, here, do all this stuff and you can change, and then come to God and he'll love you. If you have a relationship with him, he goes, I don't care what's going on with you. Just come to me like you are, and I'll love you, and we'll work all the other stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is a big difference. I mean, that we miss that for the most part, especially in the Western idea of what a relationship with God means. How do you think, in terms of nurturing the human spirit, it has to do with physical health as well? Like, studies suggesting that regular spiritual practice can positively impact things like lowering your blood pressure and an improved immune response.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. And even longevity, how long you live.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the cool thing is like, to me, science and religion, like, I never understood why they always went head to head.
Well, they didn't used to. That's only about 300 years old.
Yeah. Well, and I think where I'm at in my faith too is I don't need the science to explain why I know that this stuff is helping me.
Yeah.
But it's cool to have it now. Like, I've studied a lot of the autonomic nervous system and how when you're living from your heart space, like, physiologically, energetically, like, this heart space.
Is that heart math?
Yeah, that's heart math stuff.
So what we can do at some point is do a whole episode on heart math.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of heart math, look it up. Is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's a research institute, and it provides people with tools, with knowledge and techniques even to be able to regulate your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
And so much of the science that they have found just shows that when you're living from a place of more gratitude or more awareness, how you can actually lower your cortisol levels and you can tap into more intuition, more creativity. It helps in relational dynamics. And
maybe that has something to do with using more of your brain than we normally do, too.
Yeah. Scientists and the majority of people used to believe that, most of our messages, come from the brain to the heart, and it's actually the exact opposite. There's more information and more messages that are being sent directly from the heart.
You mean the human heart
to the brain. Yes. The physical organ. Yeah. It's just cool. It's cool to have the science, to see that the science is backing up some of these things and showing us that it's all interconnected. And I think I have seen that with myself. Like, as I have tended to my spirit, like, I've made so many other changes as well, and I'm seeing the benefits of it from changing my diet, and I guess it's like that awareness. It's like, okay, first the awareness comes in it, and then it bleeds into all aspects of your life.
Interestingly, the Hasidic Jews who follow the Levitical, I believe it's the Levitical dietary laws, have one of the lowest cancer rates in the world.
Mm-hmm. When we look at ancient cultures, almost all of them acknowledge a higher power, you know, that was central to their culture.
Right.
And what we're seeing with our culture, where that's dissipating, you know, we're seeing more of the chaos and more of
health issues
and the violent
issues.
Violence and suicide and all that stuff going up. So people who were around a lot longer than us, I feel like they were tapping into, you know, spirit.
With all the knowledge that we now have, and it's, you know, it's doubling every year and a half, 2 years knowledge,
something crazy like that. Yeah,
like that is, we've kind of gotten this arrogance that we don't need that because we have knowledge. But how's that? You know, my favorite question is, how's that working for us?
Yeah.
We're not in better health. We're not better mentally. We're not better physically. We work more. Computer was supposed to take us down to a 4-day work week. We work harder, longer. We have more stress, more anxiety.
Yeah.
And more quote unquote lostness than we've ever had.
Yeah.
So at some point, humility needs to start kicking in, and I think it is. I think it is with your generation.
Yeah.
And the one below are going, okay, this stuff isn't working, so what do we need to do that's different?
Yeah. Doing all this work and investing in our spirits and feeding our spirits, like, it naturally doesn't just stay with us. If it's something that we're fully allowing ourselves to embody, it pours out. You know, you look at people like Mother Teresa or Reverend Desmond Tutu or the Dalai Lama, like this, you know, it pours out of you and it bleeds into the rest of the community. And again, it's back to what I was saying, is like, if your religion, if your relationship with God isn't making you more loving, isn't making you more kind, or give you more of a desire to want to help your brother and sister and your neighbor, then what's the point?
Well, and that's the thing, as you were saying, that is what we are is not, it's not coming from us, although it is. We're really conduits.
Yeah, definitely.
And the love that flows through us is from a higher being and a higher power. You and I call that higher power God, and that's who He is. That's who God is.
Right.
A God of love that loves His people, loves the world. Loves the world, that, you know, the world so much that He had a plan to
and you know, they for so long I was so turned off by God and by Jesus, and that's a whole other story, you know. But when I really got to just the core of Jesus and what His message was to the world and is to the world, it's purely love, and it's radical love, and it's a love that most of us have never experienced before because we're living in a conditional plane.
Right.
You know,
we look at Him through the filter of Hollywood, through the evangelical church in the West, through religion and through wars by religious people, and they talk about God, but it's not God. It's not really, you know, that is a relationship.
What are 3 main ideas that you feel like we can take away from just this conversation?
Yeah, when you have a rude awakening, pay attention.
Yeah, that's good.
When one happens, you're in this grocery store and somebody drops a gallon can of pinto beans on your foot. What's going on there? You know, are you going to be mad, or what's going on? So it's awareness. I think I like the whole thing of humility. Continuing to practice gratefulness. Is that 3?
Yeah, that's 3.
3. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we were talking about up there about escapism.
Yeah.
There is a way out of your problems. You know, it doesn't mean you don't have them, but there's a way to walk in those problems and escape getting sucked into the undertow, or as they say in Colorado, the sieve. When you're in the white water and you hit a sieve, there's a way out of that, and that is by trust and by surrender. Things that don't seem to make sense, but anyway.
Yeah.
What about you?
Whew. So I feel like I always bring it back to this, but curiosity. Chase the questions and
Be curious.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. I think we can acknowledge fear, but we don't have to be run by it.
Well, what are you going to do? What would you do if you weren't afraid? Would be the question I would ask there.
Yeah. So be curious, acknowledge your fears, and
be what?
And be courageous.
Yeah.
And we didn't go too deep into talking about joy and laughter, but I think bringing those components into feeding your spirit are extremely important and valuable. I prayed long and hard for a spiritual community, and for so long I was afraid of that, but it's something that I have right now, and there is just more joy in community and being around others. A lot of my spiritual journey, which there was a time and place for this, but I had to go kind of shut the door and be alone with God and work through some of our stuff, our issues. And there got to a point where my spirit, I feel like, was like calling out to people and to those around me. And I think, again, everything's just comes back to being relational.
Yeah. Right.
So is that 3 things or 30 things? I don't know.
Yes.
But the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, good talk.
Yeah.
Tune in next week as we dive into some holistic living practices.
Yeah. See ya.
Okay, love you, Dad.